The moment someone calls you rich, you don't feel proud. Exposed. That's the word, and that reaction reveals something most people completely miss. About wealth, identity, and the terrifying social cost of being seen. There is a hidden mechanism, a psychological cascade, that gets triggered the instant your wealth becomes visible to others. A chain reaction so precise, so predictable, that it unfolds the same way in every culture, every income bracket, every close relationship. And by the end of this video, you will understand why the anger isn't about the word. It's about the consequences that word unleashes. Consequences so damaging that the most rational response is to deny everything. Social danger invisible. If you've ever deflected a comment about your money or felt your stomach drop when someone mentioned your finances out loud in front of others, stay until the final minute. This video was made for you, because in the next several minutes, we're going to decode the hidden psychology behind people who get angry when you call them rich. We're going to show you how one simple label rewires every relationship around you, makes you pay more for everything, turns your most generous acts into obligations, and strips away something far more valuable than the money itself. This changes everything. Think about the last time someone called you, or someone you know, rich, not as a compliment, in that flat, declarative way people do it. Oh, you're rich, and notice how fast the denial comes. Me, no, I'm not rich, I just work hard. The speed of that denial is fascinating. Not nervous, not modest, angry, genuinely defensive. And psychologists have been studying this exact reaction for decades because it breaks the obvious logic. If someone spent years building wealth, why would the recognition of that wealth feel like a threat? Here is the starting point you need to understand. Research in social psychology shows that when people hear a label applied to them, rich, poor, dangerous, lucky, they don't just receive information. They receive a prediction about how everyone around them will now behave. The label doesn't describe who you are. It predicts how you'll be treated. And for the label rich, those predictions are terrifying. Prices go up, friendships shift, generosity gets expected, trust evaporates. The anger isn't an overreaction. It's a defense mechanism against a cascade of very real social consequences. A cascade that most people who haven't experienced real wealth have absolutely no idea exists. What exactly triggers that cascade? That's where things get deeply uncomfortable, and it starts with your wallet. Stop and think about this for a second. You walk into a mechanic, a contractor, a tailor, someone who doesn't know you well. You get a quote, it sounds reasonable. Then one day that same person sees your house, hears about your investments, or learns what you do for a living. The next quote, somehow higher. The timeline, somehow longer. This is not paranoia. This is documented human behavior. Economists call it willingness to pay pricing. The subconscious, and often very conscious, adjustment people make the moment they discover someone can afford more. The wealthy don't just live in a different financial world. They live in a world where everything costs them more. And it extends far beyond strangers. A friend doesn't correct the bill when it's wrong in their favor. A family member suggests a vacation that's slightly beyond their budget, but well within yours. A business partner structures a deal where their risk is cushioned by your resources. Now, if this pattern is resonating with something you've already felt, hit like and subscribe to reprogram more of your money blocks. Because the next layer of this psychology might be the insight that changes how you navigate everything. The repricing is relentless and nearly invisible until you see it clearly. And once you've been charged for being wealthy, the label rich stops feeling like recognition. It feels like a target. But this is only the economic layer, the social layer. The one that lives inside your closest relationships, cuts far deeper. Here's where the story starts to take a genuinely darker turn, because the repricing we just talked about, that's the economic consequence of being labeled rich. But the social consequence runs far deeper, and it lives inside the people you trust most. Psychologists have identified what they call equity sensitivity, the way people constantly monitor the balance of giving and receiving in every relationship. Most people maintain a loose mental ledger of who pays for what, who shows up when it matters, who contributes more. In healthy friendships, that ledger is barely noticeable. There's enough trust and goodwill that minor imbalances don't register. But label someone as rich. Make it public knowledge that they have significantly more, and that mental ledger becomes a spreadsheet. Every dinner paid becomes a line item, and every gift becomes evidence of an assumed debt. Friends who never once thought about money start doing quiet arithmetic. Well, he can afford it. What's $100 to her? The generosity stops registering as generosity. It registers as payment on an implied obligation, a debt the wealthy person never agreed to carry. Social psychologist Adam Grant documented this pattern in his research on givers and takers, when wealth becomes known. The takers accelerate their behavior, and the genuine connections become impossible to distinguish from the strategic ones. Friendship becomes accounting. You're no longer a person who happens to have money. You're a resource with a personality attached, and that shift is one of the loneliest transformations a person can experience. But it's still only half of the picture. What comes next is what makes the anger completely inevitable. Now, what I'm about to tell you sounds impossible, but it has been documented repeatedly in behavioral psychology. The act of being generous can actually destroy a relationship when wealth is publicly known. Here's exactly how it works. Before people know you're wealthy, a gift is a gift. A paid dinner is thoughtful. An offer to help is kind. It carries emotional weight. It means something to the person receiving it. But the moment rich becomes part of how people see you, generosity loses its moral currency entirely. What was once an act of love becomes simply what you owe for the privilege of having more. Research in behavioral economics, particularly the work of Ernst Feyer and Simon Gechter on social norms and contribution expectations, shows that once a behavior becomes predictable and expected, it stops generating positive feelings when it happens and starts generating resentment when it doesn't. The wealthier you're perceived to be, the higher the baseline expectation, and the wider the disappointment gap when you don't meet it, so you pay for a round of drinks. Nobody says thank you, it was expected. You don't pay one night. Suddenly the energy in the room shifts. Something is wrong with you. This is the trap that wealthy people describe with the most raw emotion, not the repricing, not the scorekeeping. The death of genuine gratitude. When everything you give is already owed, nothing you give is truly received. Gift becomes cost, becomes silence. That cycle leads directly to something that strikes even deeper, the identity itself. Let me pause here because this next part changes the entire picture. Everything we've covered so far, the repricing, the scorekeeping, the extinction of gratitude, those are external consequences. Painful, yes, but they happen outside you. What happens inside is more devastating for most wealthy people, especially those who built it themselves. The journey to wealth is the identity, the sacrifice, the years of choosing discipline over comfort, the relationships they didn't nurture because they were building something, the mental and emotional cost of constructing a life from nothing. That story is who they are at their core, and the label rich erases the entire story in a single word. Social identity theory, developed by Henry Tadgeful and John Turner in the 1970s, explains that people's self-concept is deeply tied to the groups and narratives they belong to. When that narrative gets replaced by a label, the person experiences what psychologists call identity threat. Not ego, not offense. A genuine physiological threat response to the erasure of who they believe themselves to be. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus, who was himself born into slavery and built everything from nothing, observed, the most important possession a person has is their inner story. Seek not the good in external things, seek it in yourselves. The wealthy person didn't sacrifice for decades to become the rich person in the room. They did it to build something, to prove something, to survive something. The label collapses all of that nuance into one flat word, and the anger is the self fighting back against that erasure. Years of struggle reduced to one word. But the identity threat doesn't come only from outside. Some of it was installed long before the money ever arrived. Forget everything I just said about external reactions for a moment, because there is a layer to this that goes even deeper. One that starts in childhood, long before there was any money to worry about. Most people grow up in environments where wealth is either idealized as a distant dream or quietly associated with moral failure. Rich people are greedy. Money corrupts. If you have more than others, you must have taken it from someone. These aren't conscious beliefs. They're installed at the operating system level before you have any ability to question them. Psychologists refer to this as internalized wealth stigma, and research from Dr. Brad Klontz, one of the leading financial psychologists in the United States, found that a significant portion of high earners carry deep subconscious guilt about their financial position. They downplay their success in social settings. They apologize for their lifestyle. They work hard to appear just normal. Being called rich doesn't just describe your bank account. It activates your guilt program. So when someone calls them rich out loud, in front of others, the reaction isn't only about social consequences. It also detonates a deeply embedded program that says, having more than others makes you the villain. The label activates the shame, and the anger is the shame defending itself. As Brené Brown, whose research on vulnerability has reached millions, documented. Shame is the intensely painful feeling of believing that we are flawed, and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. Wealth and shame are more entangled than most people want to admit, and that combination produces something even more corrosive, a complete distortion of how others see everything you achieve, and the next effect, it rewrites your entire history. Here's where it gets truly insane. Because once you are labeled rich, the lens through which others interpret your every action flips completely and permanently. Before the label, you are hardworking, strategic, disciplined. After the label, you are lucky, well-connected, or operating on a different playing field than everyone else. The same behaviors carry entirely different meanings now. Same actions, completely different story. Psychologists call this attribution error under envy. The tendency of observers to reframe a successful person's choices through the lens of unfair advantage rather than personal merit. If you succeed, it was your network. If you struggle, it proves you're not as exceptional as people thought. There is no version of your story in which you are simply a person making choices and living with the consequences. The wealthy person loses the right to be human. They become a symbol to be resented or admired. This phenomenon was studied extensively in organizational psychology. Researchers found that employees known to earn significantly more than their peers were consistently rated as less relatable, more political, and probably fortunate, regardless of their actual track record or contributions. The higher income altered the entire perception retroactively, and this is what makes the anger at the rich label feel so visceral and so justified, because the person experiencing it already knows, intuitively, even if not consciously, that once that label sticks, everything they have ever done will be reinterpreted through it. We judge ourselves by our intentions, but others judge us by our outcomes. Under the envy lens, even your best moments become suspicious. But the damage doesn't stop at perception. It goes straight to the foundation of every relationship: trust. Now forget everything I just said, and imagine this instead. You meet someone. Over months, you build something real: meals shared, vulnerabilities exchanged, genuine laughter. Then they discover the money, and a small voice starts in their head. Were they ever actually my friend, or were they collecting useful people? That voice, irrational as it objectively is almost impossible to silence once it starts. Because wealth asymmetry creates what researchers call social authenticity doubt. People begin to question whether the relationship ever carried equal stakes, whether the friendship was genuine or strategic, whether the warmth was real or cultivated. Every shared memory gets quietly re-edited through the lens of the power imbalance. The wealthy person didn't change, the relationship didn't change, but the story of the relationship changed the moment the wealth became visible. The past becomes suspicious, even when the present is exactly the same. This is precisely why many wealthy people actively hide their financial position when forming new relationships. Not out of deception, but out of a genuine need to be known as a person before being known as a resource. As Warren Buffett has spoken about for decades, the only relationships that withstand the weight of wealth are the ones formed before it was visible. Wealth makes building new genuine trust nearly impossible. When you are the rich one, you can never be entirely certain who's there for you and who's there for what you represent. That permanent background noise, always wondering who's real, is one of the most psychologically corrosive aspects of visible wealth. And what makes this cascade complete, what connects all of these threads into a single devastating pattern, that's exactly what comes next. And it's the part nobody has ever explained to you clearly. This is the part that changes everything we have walked through. The repricing, the social ledger, the death of gratitude, the identity erasure, the shame activation, the envy lens, the trust that quietly dissolves. None of it is random. It is a system, a precise, replicable psychological cascade triggered by a single variable: visibility. This is the insight that resolves the open question we raised at the beginning. The anger isn't about the label. The anger is about what the label activates. A cascade of social consequences that begins the moment wealth is seen. Think about what the word rich actually does when spoken out loud. It doesn't create a single new fact. The money was there before. The person was the same. What the label does is convert private reality into public identity. And that conversion has enormous, immediate, and unavoidable social consequences. Once visible, everything activates simultaneously. Contractors reprice their quotes. Friends open their mental ledgers. Family members recalibrate their expectations. Old acquaintances reassess every past interaction. And every generous act, every moment of vulnerability, every ordinary human gesture. All of it gets filtered through the lens of they can afford it. The anger at the word rich is a survival instinct, protecting against a cascade of very real, and very predictable social losses. A study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that individuals who believed others were aware of their income were significantly more likely to report loneliness, distrust, and social withdrawal. Even when their external relationships appeared completely normal, the wealth hadn't changed. The visibility had. Wealth plus visibility equals isolation. The most dangerous thing about being rich isn't the money, it's being seen. If this revelation just shifted something in how you see your own relationship with money and visibility, share this with as many people as you possibly can. This truth needs to reach everyone who has ever hidden their success out of fear, everyone who has ever felt the social cost of being seen. And comment right now, do you think wealthy people are right to hide their finances? Comment hide IT or show IT. I genuinely want to know where you stand on this. So now you understand the full picture. And the real question isn't why do wealthy people get angry at the label. The question that actually matters is this: how do you build real wealth without triggering the cascade that quietly dismantles everything else? Here is what the psychology actually teaches us. The most financially successful and socially fulfilled people are not the ones who flaunt their wealth as power or who hide from it in shame. They are the ones who have developed what psychologists call wealth integration. The ability to hold their financial position as one dimension of a full, complex, deeply rooted identity. They don't need the label to define them. They don't fear the label either. They have done the internal work to separate their worth from their net worth, their generosity from their obligation, and their relationships from their resources. Wealth is not about having a lot of money. It's about having a lot of options. The anger at being called rich is ultimately a signal that the internal integration hasn't happened yet, that the wealth arrived before the psychological infrastructure to carry it did. Wealth without identity creates permanent fear. And the path forward isn't to hide the money or to wear it as armor. It's to become so grounded in who you are, beyond the numbers, that no label from anyone can threaten what you know to be true about yourself. 1. Separate your worth from your net worth. 2. Build relationships before wealth is visible. 3. Give generously from abundance, not from obligation. 4. Protect your identity narrative with radical clarity, because your mind is either programmed for wealth or for the fear of wealth. And now, for the first time, you know the difference. The choice is yours. Everything we explored today points to one truth that most people will never be told directly. Anger at the word rich is not false modesty. It is not insecurity about success. It is not a personality flaw. It is a rational, documented defense response to a cascade of social consequences that begins the moment wealth becomes visible. The repricing, the scorekeeping, the extinction of genuine gratitude, the identity erasure, the trust that quietly dissolves, the envy that rewrites your entire story. All of it triggered by one single word. The people who get angry when called rich are not confused about their own success. They understand it better than anyone watching from the outside, because they have already paid the social price of being seen. And the anger is the memory of every time that price was extracted without consent. But here is the deeper truth, the one that can actually change how you build your life from this point forward. The goal is not to hide what you have. It's to become so rooted in who you are that visibility loses its power over you. When your identity doesn't depend on the label, when your generosity flows from abundance rather than obligation, when your relationships were built on character before capital, the cascade loses its teeth. The label becomes just a word. As Epictetus, who lived as a slave before becoming one of the most celebrated minds in Western philosophy, taught us, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. True wealth, the kind that doesn't require hiding, is built from the inside out. Not from what people know about your accounts, but from what you know about yourself. Your mind is your greatest asset. If you made it this far, prove it. Comment wealth invisible. Because now you understand why the most powerful wealth is the kind no label can ever touch. Your mind is either programmed for wealth or for the fear of it. Now you know how to reprogram it.